Do you have any information in regards to land grabbing, or you're aware of any person who has been evicted and their property destroyed because of land disputes? Report to Witness Radio through our numbers 0414-697-221 or WhatsApp 0745-965-765, or you can report directly to our website on www.witnessradio.org. Just click on the map, follow the direction, click on the map indicating the individuals and the land being grabbed. Click on that word, report evictions. Then report any victim of land evictions. Thereafter, search for your area of residence on that map. Click your area of residence, then a red dot will indicate. Click the red dot and fill in the form, then save your input. Don't forget to attach the picture of the grabbed land in question, then upload to send. Witness Radio.
Witness Radio.
Witness Radio.
Witness Radio.
In a world racing toward clean energy, who's left behind? Welcome to Eyes on a Just Energy Transition, the program that highlights on Africa's journey toward a fair and inclusive energy future.
Hello, our dear listener. Welcome to Witness Radio, your trusted voice. You are listening to Eyes on a Just Energy Transition, where we take you on an informative journey of energy transition across Africa. And this is Witness Radio series program, The Media in the Renewable Energy. In this series, we are using the power of the media to shine a light on Uganda's journey towards clean, sustainable energy. To listen to us, visit our website, www.witnessradio.org, or visit Google Play Store and download the Witness Radio app. And in case you would like to reach us out, please chat with us on our WhatsApp +256 745 965 765, or by calling us directly on +256 414 697 221, and we'll hear from you, or on all our social media platforms. Now, as you may know, African countries are currently on the journey transiting to renewable energy away from fossil fuels and firewood, and the transition promises to deliver enormous socio-economic benefits to these countries, improving energy access, creating jobs, and boosting energy security. But for these countries to achieve this goal, they must make a great turn away from fossil fuel technologies to a more sustainable, climate-friendly power strategy aligned with the Paris Agreement and with low carbon growth. And in this program, we bring you different renewable energy experts, partners, beneficiaries, and individuals to enlighten us as they share with us their experiences about the transition journey of the renewable or clean energy. But one thing you should not forget is that the mining of minerals in African countries has caused a huge negative impact on communities and the environment. This is according to a credible research conducted by both the African organizations and NGOs. The activities of mining have left the community and the environment in danger of pollution, human rights abuse, and forced evictions from land. And the root cause of this is as a result of greedy companies rushing to get these minerals. And so today we bring you a frontline voices from Guinea, Western Africa, discussing about energy transition and the impact to the communities, and has attracted over 150 online participants contributing to the program. But before we listen to the Frontline, let us go for a commercial break, and when we return, we'll listen to the conversation.
Eyes on a Just Energy Transition, a program that unpacks Africa's shift toward cleaner, fairer, and more sustainable energy. Join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. East African Standard Time as we spotlight communities, policies, and voices shaping the continent's energy future. Stay informed, stay empowered. Keep your eyes on a just energy transition right here on Witness Radio.
Witness Radio.
Witness Radio.
Witness Radio.
Witness Radio.
You're listening to Eyes on a Just Energy Transition.
Welcome back from that commercial break, and now let's listen to the Frontline voices.
I will start with Amadou Ba, who is the Executive Director of Action Mine. Is one of the African strong voices and its organization is also member of the African Coalition on Green Minerals. So welcome, Ba. We have Dustin Rosa, who is the researcher director of Inclusive Development International. Welcome, Rist. And also we have Mariama Bari, is also the African Program Associate at Inclusive Development. Welcome. Lastly, Natalie Bugalski, who is also the Senior Legal and Policy Director. Welcome, Natalie. Yeah, it's okay. So I come back to Ba, who, as I said, is one of the African voices, critical voices, on this topic of energy transition. So, Ba, my first question to you will be, what the energy transition mean for you as a Guinean, but also what the mining impacts, mining activities impact on communities in Guinea.
Okay, merci, cher Emmanuel. Merci à tous les participants.
Thank you to all the participants, and for those who are here, thank you to our IDI, our partner, with our co-organizers of this important panel on energy transition. So, before talking about that, I would like to talk about the background of Guinea. For those who don't know it, Guinea is a country that is in Western Africa and is wealthy in terms of natural resources, among which are diamond, gold, nickel, graphite, iron, and bauxite, very widely used today because we are the country that has the most reserves of oil in the world, and of course we are competing with Australia and other countries for its production. So bauxite in Guinea produces between 100 million and 150 million tons of bauxite per year in terms of tons, and we're talking about 50 billion yearly. 80% go to China, and the rest of the production is sold to Germany, Spain, France, the United States, Canada, and India. But this bauxite represents a major source of income for Guinea, but also an important source in terms of difficulties for certain local communities. The state is trying to exploit bauxite in order to increase the state's income and benefits. Benefits are in combat. While that is happening, on the other hand, farmers are suffering, citizens are suffering, and that means that today when we talk about energy transition, it is something that is very abstract for communities. They don't understand what we're talking about. What's the roadmap? What's the trend? What are the forward-looking perspectives in terms of energy transition? I want to flag that bauxite is one of the central elements needed for energy transition because it is used to make aluminum, and aluminum is used to make wind, to make batteries, to make airplanes, to make cars, to make wind turbines, among many other things that are needed for green energy. When we talk about energy transition, what does it mean for us as communities that are impacted by mining projects? We have about 10 companies that are working on bauxite, of course CBT, which is a mining company, SMB as well, that is a Chinese company. Now, to date, energy transition for us means exactly the world pours into Guinea in order to try and get their hands on bauxite, but a lot of communities are suffering from this affluence, this rush towards bauxite through the loss, of course, of subsistence resources, notably water, resources, land, as well as other economic opportunities that were linked to agropastoralism, which have been lost because of mining or that have been lost because of mining. There are many impacts in terms of social development, energy environment, and forced displacement as a whole community, of course. So this is a situation that places citizens in a very difficult situation when, while the world wants to move towards clean energy and experience an energy transition going from fossil fuels to clean energy or green energy, well, one of the substitutes that they want to use is bauxite. And bauxite today represents a lot for the community because we're talking about fuels that are taken over, we're talking about waters that are polluted, we're talking about grazing areas that are taken over as well. Now, what does this mean? Is this fair? Well, today we are observing that transition is not fair because there are no concrete measures that protect local communities and their rights. And for us, there's no just transition if some people are benefiting while others are suffering. And our citizens are not benefiting in any way to date because we pay a lot of money to buy solar panels to access clean energy, but we live in energy poverty and we don't have the means to buy a Tesla because we can't even have an electric vehicle where we live. We don't have electricity. And so all of this means that there are measures that, of course, want to reduce CO2 emissions, but that has a huge negative impact on local communities, on the future of generations and generations, because where we live, our wealth is land, grazing land, our waters, because we live thanks to our pastoral activities. So we think that it is urgent that this planning and this roadmap be reviewed. From a state point of view, we need to have regulation in order to control the social environmental aspects. We need to take responsibility and have companies that take responsibility. And in the face of local communities, and also those who lend money to these companies, and those investors, and also responsibility from those who buy the products at the end of the production chain, because we need to have ideas that help us understand each other and allow a just transition. We need communities to be respected, to be consulted, to be involved, to be an active part of projects and fully active. We don't want them to be victims of all these projects. And we need the state, who is responsible for protecting human rights, has to play its role and take responsibility by legislating and creating regulations that have to be respected by companies. We need to ensure the access to socioeconomic rights for citizens, because loss of access to well-being is a real issue for citizens. So access to BAC, of course, is very in high demand today, but this is also a source of terrible issues for millions and millions and many communities. What I want to do is to be at the heart of the system. That is, we must not decide without the communities. The state must not accept a project without the communities giving us their approval, and that it is practically something inclusive where you have the three parties working together. Tripartite consultation, so the communities, civil society, the state, and companies, of course, in order to have projects that are responsible and well thought out. Tesla, because the device itself does not allow us to have an electric vehicle at home. And all of this constitutes measures that go in the direction, of course, of reducing CO2 emissions. But this reduction negatively impacts communities, negatively impacts the future of several generations. Because for us, wealth is the land, it's the waterways, it's the pastures, since communities live from agricultural activities. So we think that today there is a need to review this device at all levels, at the level of mining companies, at the level of the state, of course, to review the regulation, the legislation in force in relation to this, to be even more careful about environmental and social aspects, to companies to have a certain responsibility in terms of conduct towards communities, but also, on the other hand, those who lend money to these companies, but also those who buy the products coming from these companies. So this whole chain constitutes the chain of responsibility that is upstream, of course, downstream, to make sure that there is, in a way, a symbiosis of ideas going in the direction of being able to operate a fair transition. The transition is only fair when each participating party finds its own account, that the communities are respected, consulted, involved, that they are a fully participating party of the project, that they are not, in fact, victims at any time of the project, and that the state, which has the responsibility to protect human rights, plays its role through these regal institutions, and that companies put in place, in fact, the highest standards in terms of human rights, protection on environmental issues, on issues of socioeconomic rights, in particular the loss of subsistence, which constitutes, in fact, a serious problem today in our country. So bauxite is a material sought by the world today, but this researched material is likely to be, in fact, a source of problems for millions and millions of communities impacted by mining exploitation. And what we can say is that today, this exploitation practically raises aspirations for the state to be able, of course, to play a role in the global supply chain of bauxite. This, of course, allows the country to play an important role on this chain and to have a certain global geopolitical influence if, of course, we know how to play our cards. It allows companies to secure their supply chain and to be able to feed the refineries, or in any case their customers, who buy bauxite. It normally allows our communities to also have shared benefits. And what do we call shared benefits? That is, communities must be at the heart of the system. That is, we must not decide without the communities. The state must not accept a project without the communities giving us their approval, and that it is practically something inclusive, where you have the three parties working together, the authorities, the communities, with civil society, of course, but also the companies, to have them do projects, to have them grow, and above all, be much more responsible.
Yes, before we proceed, let's go for a commercial break, and when we return, we shall proceed with the conversation.
Oyagala okweyongera okuguka mu mateeka agakwata ku ttaka ganyula mu pulogulaamu za Witness Radio osomesebwe butya bw'osobola okukuuma ettaka lyo okuva mu mikono gy'abannakigwanyizi. Oli mulwanizi wa ddembe, oyagala amaloboozi g'ebitundu oba ag'abantu b'olwanira agatuuka eri abavunaanyizibwa? Weekwate rediyo y'abantu Witness Radio, wuliriza Witness Radio okumanya enkulaakulana y'ettaka nga tekosa abantu mu bitundu mweteekeddwa oba obutonde bw'ensi.
Farmers, do you want to learn essential agricultural practices and benefit from your land? Look no further. Tune in to Witness Radio for expert knowledge and guidance.
You're listening to Eyes on a Just Energy Transition.
Welcome back from that break. You are listening to Eyes on a Just Energy Transition at Witness Radio, where we take you on an informative journey, and at the moment, we continue with the Frontline Voices conversation all the way from Guinea, talking about energy transition and the impact on the communities.
The energy transition is not fair for communities because of loss of land, pollution, and forced evictions. After listening to Bai's presentation, can you explain what did you find in your your new report on CBG mine.
Thank you, Emmanuel. So I'd like to talk a little bit about a specific mine that Amadou mentioned, the CBG bauxite mine, which is planning to expand, and what that means for the communities that are in the path of the expansion. So in 2023, CBG's then Director General said the mine was going to expand its bauxite production by about a third to meet the growing demand for aluminum, for electric cars, EV batteries, things like solar panels. So CBG is already one of the largest mines, bauxite mines in the world, and this expansion is going to make it just that much bigger. The mine is owned by 4 players. It's 3 companies that hold a majority stake of 51%. So these are the mining companies Rio Tinto and Alcoa, along with a firm called Dadco, which has business in Germany. So they hold 51%. And then the remaining 49%, a minority share, is controlled by the Guinean government. So CBG's corporate owners, those 3 companies I mentioned, take the bauxite from the mine and they export the vast majority of that bauxite and process it into aluminum in their vertically integrated supply chains. And then the aluminum then goes on to a range of customers, including car companies like BMW, Mercedes, Audi, GM, Ford, and Toyota, which you can see up there. And there are also renewable energy companies in that supply chain. So over the last year and a half, I visited villages in the likely path of the mine's expansion zone in northwestern Guinea. And I wanted to understand, what they knew about CBG and this plan to expand. And, did they know what happens when a mine comes to a village like theirs? Do they know how it's going to affect their homes, their land, their crops? And, what do they fear about mining coming? But also, what do they want to happen to their land? How would they try to protect it from the various serious impacts of mining? And how do they want to benefit from this really valuable mineral that's being extracted from land that their villages have occupied for generations? And, I just want to acknowledge, obviously, I should not be the one up here talking to you about these things. It really should be the community members from Guinea. And we did try to bring them here to speak on this panel, but we could not get them appointments at the Swiss Embassy to get this. However, you can read their stories, their hopes, their fears, their aspirations in a report that Emmanuel mentioned that we're releasing today. You can find that on our website, inclusivedevelopment.net. There are also copies in the room. Want to take a look. So CBG's mining concession is massive. It's about the size of Luxembourg. And up on the screen, you can see a map showing the boundaries of that concession, along with all of the villages that are in that mining concession. And so, during my time in Guinea, gathering information for this report, one of the things that was just so striking to me was the stark difference between the areas that have been mined by CBG and then the areas that have not yet been mined but are within the concession. So up on the screen, there's a satellite image that's really kind of a zoomed in view of part of that mining concession. And you can see there's a blue line going through the middle of the concession. That's the Kogan River, and it really kind of divides the concession in half. So on the northeast side, that big green area, that's where the mining has not happened yet. And you can see those 2 pins up there are villages that I visited, but they're in the expansion zone. And then southwest, on the other side of the Kogan, is where the mining has happened. And you can see all the brown spots, and this is all visible from space. But, I think those satellite images don't really capture what it's like to be on the ground and to actually see these mining areas up close. CBG has strip mined these areas really for decades, since the 1970s. As you kind of drive around these areas, you just see these massive brown open pits that are just stretching to the horizon. And they're really stripped of all signs of life. I mean, the trees, the topsoil, and really entire villages are just cleaved from existence. And as you can imagine, mining has just devastated the lives of people that live in these areas. CBG has grabbed community land without permission from local people, and runoff from the strip mining has polluted rivers and springs. And so, without access to fertile soil to farm, and without access to clean water, also grazing areas for livestock, thousands of people have experienced declines in their living standards. And I just wanted to put 2 photos up on the screen that show what mining can do to water sources like rivers. So these 2 pictures show the same bend in a river south in the mining areas, just different times. So the one on the left obviously is clean, but the one on the right is full of sedimentation from the mine. And obviously, if you live near this river and you rely on this river for water, and it's full of that sediment, you are not going to go and collect water from that river. So that's what things look like on one side of the river, but what does it look like on the other side of the river where mining has not happened yet? And that's what I wanted to travel and find out. So from the mining town of Sangareddy, where CBG is based, you drive north through all of the mining sites, and then you come to the Kogan River. You actually have to wade across the river in four-wheel drives because there aren't any bridges nearby to get across. And then once you get on the other side of the river, you spend hours driving through these rocky dirt roads kind of cut through the forest plateaus. And as you can see from the video, I mean, the landscape north is pristine. I mean, the forests, the waterways, the plateaus are completely undisturbed, and the area is home to rich biodiversity, including critically endangered chimpanzees. And just being there, I mean, it's so clear that this landscape and ecosystem just faces such tremendous risk if mining were to happen here. And we know that CBG is exploring in 85 villages in the river, or north of the river, sorry, and that's based on information that we've seen. And so the company has visited these villages, and it's actually drilling holes to better identify the bauxite deposits before they start mining. So I spent a lot of time in 2 villages speaking to people to try to understand their situation better. These are pretty remote villages. They don't have electricity, they don't have plumbing, mobile service is pretty unreliable. And the people there farm crops like rice and sorghum and vegetables on small family plots of land. And then during the dry season, when the fields are fallow and food is scarce, people go to the forests nearby and they forage for nuts and fruit and wild vegetables to get by. And then outside the villages, there are these really large grassy plateaus that people manage collectively, and they use these to graze their livestock. And it's actually underneath these plateaus where most of the bauxite is located. So when CBG is visiting these villages, it's not really telling people what's going on. It doesn't say, why the company is there, when the mining is going to start, where the mining will occur. That's according to the people that I spoke to. So, I mean, as you can imagine, if you're living in a village like this and CBG is coming to your village, you're going to be really worried. And a lot of them have actually seen the devastation on the other side of the river. So they have a real sense of what may be coming for their villages. So one of the people I spoke to is this woman here. Her name is Kadiatu Ba. She lives in a village called Hore Lari. And one of her first memories is when she was a 7-year-old girl, she remembered an airplane, a white airplane, circling her village. And she now knows that there were mining company people in that airplane. So she's now 70 years old. This was in the 1960s when she had that memory. She's 70 now, and really the rhythms of village life have not changed much since she was a little girl. And the threat of mining has never really gone away her entire life, and now it's especially acute. She says that CBG representatives have visited her village in recent months, but they've never explained why they're there, why they want access to the land. Nonetheless, I mean, Kadiatu is very clear about who should decide what happens to the land that her community is on. She told me, quote, "This land is ours. We inherited it from our fathers. We want to pass it on to our sons. We should decide what happens to this land." Another person I met is this man here, Ibrahima Diallo. Ibrahima is 35 years old. He was born in a different village. It's called Teliwara, and he still lives there now. And like a lot of us, when Ibrahima was growing up, he dreamed of leaving his hometown behind and going to the big city and finding a new life. So when he was in his early 20s, he worked up the courage, but also saved enough money to leave. And he made his way to neighboring Senegal, and he settled in San Luis, which is this bustling coastal city. He ran a business. He stayed there for about 5 years, and things were going pretty well. But he found himself really missing just the peace and the quiet and the beauty of his village and the landscape back home. And he missed his parents and his friends. So he decided to move back, and he now lives in the same thatched hut that he grew up in as a boy. He married a woman from a nearby village, and he's just extremely happy to be back. So CBG has come to his village as well, and he's also worried. He's seen what's happened on the other side of the river in the mining areas, and he's seen how mining has caused, in his words, the total destruction of life there. So when we spoke, I mean, Ibrahima had very clear ideas about what should happen if mining comes to his village. He says if CBG comes, it has a responsibility to improve the lives of local people. His village needs better roads, it needs electricity, it needs employment opportunities for people like him. So, he can imagine the community taking a share of the mining revenue and managing that money and deciding what the community needs and making that call. And he also wants to make sure that the farmland, the water, the plateaus, all the stuff that people rely on, those resources are protected as much as possible from the damage caused by mining. And, really, nearly everybody I spoke to had ideas about what should happen, but also what should not happen if CBG comes. And the community leaders I spoke to, including Ibrahima, really say they want to sit down with CBG and they want to negotiate these ideas directly with CBG on equal footing, and they want to do that before mining starts and it's too late. And I think ultimately Ibrahima wants the same thing that all of us would want. He wants to stay in his home village, his home, and he wants to provide a good life for himself and his wife, and eventually he wants to have children and he wants to raise them in his village. And because he left and he went to Senegal and he was drawn back to his home because of its beauty, its quiet, its peace, I think he really understands how special this place is. And he said something to me that has just really stayed with me. He said, quote, "I love Teliwara more than any other place in the world, and I will do anything to stay here."
Now, before we proceed, let's go for yet another commercial break, and when we return, we'll continue from here.
Witness Radio, where your voice is a weapon. Justice for all.
Witness Radio etukoledde ebintu bingi mu mbeera eno etuyiseemu ey'okuba nti twagobaganyizibwa ku mataka nga tuyina ennaku ne Witness Radio egezezaako tuzaamu essuubi n'okutuwa emisomo egy'enjawulo egikwatagana n'eddembe lyaffe ku mataka, egikwatagana n'obutonde bw'ensi, egikwatagana n'embeera y'abantu na butya bwe tuyinza okubeerawo.
Tune in today. Witness Radio, shining the light. Do development projects or land evictions affect your community? Share these experiences with us on Witness Radio.
You're listening to Eyes on a Just Energy Transition.
Welcome back from that break. Now you are listening to Eyes on a Just Energy Transition at Witness Radio, where we take you on an informative journey and at the moment focusing on Uganda's renewable energy transition plan. And this time we are listening to Frontline voices from Guinea, where online participants are also contributing to the discussion.
So I'm going to move to Natalie, and who has a huge experience worldwide in terms of management of environmental risk. So can you talk about CBG, what goes wrong in human rights due diligence management, and what IDI and other organizations are proposing?
Okay, thank you so much, Emmanuel, and thank you for all my wonderful colleagues for your excellent presentations and just the work we are doing together, which really is wonderful work for the communities, and I feel very privileged to be able to work with a group of people. And thank you to all of you for coming today, and those of you online who we can't see. So I want to just shift gears a little. We've heard a lot about what's going on the ground, but I want to take a look at the environmental and social risk management system that most mines use these days to try to meet the global standards. And I want to unpack what goes so wrong for communities under that approach. And to do that, I'm going to take you back in time, about a decade. I wish we could really do that in time, to examine what happened the last time CBG wanted to expand its mine, to understand what went wrong. And actually, because I am the last panellist, and you've all probably had a long day, and I want to make sure you're paying attention, my teacher of me in me coming out, I'm actually going to ask all of you to spot what went wrong. So it's going to be a little interactive, so you need to pay attention to what I'm saying. Okay, let's go back in time to circa 2014, when there's a huge surge in global demand for aluminium products. And CBG wants to meet that demand by expanding its mine to extract the very high quality bauxite south of the Kogon River. But of course, mining infrastructure is very expensive, especially in such a remote location. So CBG needs to raise a huge amount of capital to develop its mine. So it decides to approach the IFC to de-risk the project, and a host of commercial commercial bank for loans. But to secure those loans, it has to show that it can meet IFC's environmental and social performance standards. So CBG does what most project developers do in that situation and hires a team of consultants to conduct environmental and social impact assessments. But what those consultants find is that the people set to be affected by the mine expansion are terrified. In their report, the impact assessors write, there are serious concerns regarding the survival of the village economy given the mining plan presented to the communities. The communities already conceive that CBG will come and destroy most of their farmland and pastures. They express deep worries, often asking, how are we going to go on living? And the impact assessment then goes on to warn that unless CBG takes a dramatically different approach, most of the villages impacted are likely to suffer a deep, generalised and long-term slide poverty. And they advise that CBG must respect the clearly expressed need for people to be acknowledged, informed and involved in the expansion project in order to revert that trend. Now, that was the moment that CBG and its shareholders, Rio Tinto and Alcoa, should have taken that expert advice and entered into a genuine process of involving community in decision-making about the mine. And IFC and the other lenders should have made that a condition of their loan. And if they'd done so, it could have changed the trajectory of how that project unfolded. But that's not what happens. Instead, that expert advice is ignored and the banks approve the loan anyway. And CBG, with Rio Tinto and Alcoa's support, moved full steam ahead with the mine's expansion, essentially sweeping the community's concerns under the carpet. Now, to be fair, CBG did commit to an environmental and social action plan to address the risks identified in the impact assessment. But here's my question to you. Who do you think was involved in designing the mitigation measures in that plan? The lenders, like IFC? Who else? The consultants, all the fly-in consultants who came in. The mining company, maybe probably Rio Tinto and Alcoa. I don't know if they want to say when we get to the discussion, but they may have been involved, and CBG. And who do you think was not involved in designing or agreeing to that plan? The local communities. The communities whose interests and lives were most at stake by the effectiveness of that plan. Can you imagine how that would feel? And in fact, the action plan, which is still available online, it's very weak. If you read it, it's quite evident. It was clearly not commensurate to the risks posed to the communities. And indeed, fast forward 10 years, the most recent independent monitoring report from just last year, 2024, says the risk that livelihood restoration will not be possible for some communities is considered to be high, with the potential that communities will be dependent on CBG for survival through continuous food assistance, and that grievances will multiply. There's just a shocking situation. And that's where the current top-down, disempowering approach to managing risks to communities has gotten us today. So we've been supporting those communities, okay? We don't want to see that happen again. What we're trying to avoid here, why we're here today, is that we want to avoid that same terrible outcome for the community north of Colgon as CBG expands. There has to be a better approach. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I just want to give you a little bit of context. So I've worked with communities displaced by large-scale investment projects like mines in Guinea and plantations in Cambodia for most of my career. And along with some of you in this room, and probably some of those of you online, I've spent year after year fighting grueling battle to help these communities secure redress to these devastating impacts that they've suffered. And frankly, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of running around trying to put out fires unnecessarily caused by some of the wealthiest corporations and development institutions of our time. I want to see a systems change that stops the displacement and destruction from happening in the first place. So we wrote a proposal for a new system. A just alternative to development forced displacement. And it's been endorsed so far by more than 60 organisations, both from global organisations, Indigenous coalitions, grassroots organisations, and we invite more endorsements for anyone who wants to put their name on it. And what our proposal calls for is for developers and all the investors and lenders and buyers behind the projects to put in place 6 measures that give communities real agency agency and power over decisions about projects that pose significant risks to their land and livelihood. Now, I won't go through the 6 measures in detail. It's hopefully a lot of you have a copy of this and it's available online. But I do want to briefly touch on a few points. The first point is that communities need to have access to independent technical and legal support from the very beginning so they can fully understand and analyse the project risks and the options available. And so they can weigh up those risks against the realistic development opportunities that may be available if the mine moves forward. Not the false promises that never come to be, but the realistic development opportunities. Second, project developers must involve communities in early decisions about mine design and footprint with the aim of avoiding harm and displacement to the maximum extent possible, even if it increases project costs upfront. And that means getting the mining engineers talking to communities right at the start to learn how they live their lives, what do their livelihoods involve, and see if they can problem solve together so that community knowledge and ideas are brought into project design from the very beginning. This really seems like a no-brainer to me, to bring the mining engineers in early to speak directly to the communities and problem solve. Next is that project developers should engage in fair negotiations with communities on the terms that project need. So we heard Mariam talk about our experience, and particularly Mariam and Nilsson's experience, supporting communities through intensive mediations that are facilitated by the CAO, the Compliance Advisor Ombudsman of the IFC, a lender to CBG, to try to secure remedies. And it's very challenging. But experiences like these, and in other cases we've worked on, have taught us that when done well, communities can have real agency in negotiating agreements through mediation. But why not deploy these consensus-building tools upfront to prevent harm before it happens? Now, it's possible that after all of that analysis and negotiation, communities will decide that the trade-offs are just not worth it and they don't want the project to proceed. In those difficult cases, any expropriation of land must meet the international human rights law tests of necessity, proportionality, and genuine public interest. And if the community is Indigenous, there must be free, prior informed consent. But even in those exceptional cases where expropriation is justified on human rights grounds, project developers should still seek to negotiate and reach agreements with communities on things like specific no-go zones, the terms of resettlement, and development benefits. And those agreements can't be empty promises. They must be enforceable by the communities themselves, either through the courts or human rights compliant arbitration. And crucially, the costs of enforcement should not fall on communities. And that brings us to the last pillar of our proposal, which is the role of investors and buyers. All the corporate actors that enable and profit from the mine, upstream and downstream, should use their collective resources to enable this approach. That includes establishing pooled funds administered at arm's length to finance the mediation and the independent legal and technical support to communities. And they should use their leverage by making this approach a condition of financing or procurement. Now, I'll just close by saying the evidence is pretty clear that this approach makes sense for everyone. It gives communities agency and dignity, but it also makes sense for the developers and investors. Projects that forcibly displace people generate conflict, delays, and stranded assets. Projects that respect rights and bring benefits to local communities are far more likely to succeed. So we're calling on global standard setters like the IFC to adopt this approach. But our immediate and most urgent call is for these measures to be put in place for the communities who lie in CBG expansion zone. We're calling on CBG, Rio Tinto, Alcoa and Dadco, the mine's lenders, as well as all the companies that source from the mine, including Mercedes, BMW, Audi, Ford, GM, Toyota and Porsche, to all get on board with this approach and start engaging now to show these communities the respect and dignity they deserve.
This is Witness Radio, connecting Indigenous and local community voices across the globe.
You're listening to Eyes on a Just Energy Transition.
And as we wrap up today's episode, you should be reminded that African countries are on the journey transiting from fossil fuels to renewable energy or clean cooking, and this requires you too to embrace the efforts and be part of the great transformation. And before we end the program, please, if you want to listen to us, visit our website www.witnessradio.org or visit Google Play Store and download the Witness Radio app. And in case you would like to reach us out, please chat with us on our WhatsApp +256 745 965 765 or by calling us directly on +256 414 697 221 and we will hear from you, or on all our social media platforms. Thank you for keeping it locked on Witness Radio. Stay tuned, stay informed and stay inspired to be part of the energy revolution. Please do not forget that Eyes on a Just Energy Transition airs on Witness Radio every Monday, Wednesday and Friday from 10 a.m. East African Standard Time. Catch us again, same time, same radio station. I am Will Stephen, your host.
That was Eyes on a Just Energy Transition, amplifying community voices and keeping justice at the center of Africa's clean energy shift. Join us again next time and keep your eyes open for change.